What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for coming back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about An American Werewolf in London. Blacktastic Media is back once again for another collab. I'm super happy to have him here in this video to talk about one of the most classic horror films and just werewolf films of all time. So we're going to be hearing from him in just a little bit, but a big thanks to him for being here in this video. And yeah, let's go ahead and get into this movie. Written and directed by John Landis, who at this point was pretty well known for comedy, but yeah, he wanted to make this movie, finally got the opportunity to make it, and yeah, like I just mentioned, would go on to become probably one of the best horror and werewolf films of all time. A film that does a great job of being not only a horror film and a werewolf film, but also having dramatic and romantic elements, as well as a lot of comedic elements sprinkled in throughout this movie. I think John Landis wrote and directed this film beautifully, and I do thoroughly still enjoy this film. This for me is just a flat out entertaining horror film. It's not necessarily scary to me. I was never scared of it as a kid. I think I had already kind of seen some of the imagery, and at that point I was already becoming a little bit of a horror fan myself. And now that I'm older and I'm a full-fledged horror fan and I'm very well versed in a lot of horror, it's not scary, but I will say that I can see this movie still creeping out some people in certain scenes. But outside of that, for me, this is just a thoroughly entertaining film. And I should also mention that this is actually the first time I'm doing something like this, and what I mean by like this is that I actually just recently was on Rashad G Reviews channel for this movie, and this is the first time that I've done a collab on somebody else's channel for a movie, and then it kind of spawned my inspiration to do my own review here on my channel, and I thought I'd have somebody else check it out, which was Blacktastic, which of course we're going to hear from him in just a little bit, but I love that he was able to kind of give his take on it, not only from a reviewer standpoint, but also kind of what it was like for him to grow up and be able to see this movie. So a big thanks to Blacktastic once again for being in this review. But yeah, I really thoroughly enjoyed this movie. For anybody who has never seen it before, I will be touching on spoilers, but as you can imagine with the title, An American Werewolf in London, you know, there's a werewolf in London, and I can only imagine that you can imagine where that goes. So here we go. Let's talk a little bit about this. At the beginning of the film, we were introduced to David and Jack, and they're these two American guys who are backpacking through Europe. And what I love about the way that this film opens for me is the fact that they really do spend a good amount of time with these characters right at the very beginning. A very brief amount of time, but a good amount of time, just allowing you to kind of see them have conversations. You know, at the beginning of almost every movie, you get a setup for who the characters are, and it's usually maybe sometimes through action or maybe through dialogue, and in this case it's through dialogue, but I find it to be just very natural, very nuanced dialogue. What I enjoy about it is that you just have these two guys just kind of talking about their past and people that they may know, and it just seems like you're just listening in on a conversation. And there's this element about it at first that you're kind of like, what are we even listening to? But you start to find yourself kind of smirking and laughing as they continue to talk, because you find yourself just really enjoying their friendship and the discussion. It doesn't matter if the, you know, what they're talking about really leads into anything for the film later on, which it doesn't, outside of a couple, like, you know, nods to what they were talking about before. But for the most part, it's really just about you kind of getting to feel a little bit comfortable with these guys and understanding who they are. So I really enjoy that right out of the gate, the way that this movie opens and the time you spend with those characters, getting to know them. Not too long into their backpacking, they end up coming across this pub called the Slaughtered Lamb, a very iconic horror location at this point, and the imagery and the logo on it, this big creepy imagery. Yeah, you know, it's just iconic when it comes to horror nowadays. And yeah, they end up going to the Slaughtered Lamb, and it's this very strange pub. They come in and it's not necessarily a great greeting. Everybody's looking at them kind of with the cold shoulder. There's a pentagram on the wall. I believe it's a pentagram. And they end up asking about that. And there's this mix of people who want them to go and some people who don't want them to go. And even when they're kicked out of the pub or kind of pushed out of the pub by just, you know, people essentially telling them to leave, they tell them to stay on the road. And so what I love about this scene right at the very beginning of the movie is that you have these characters that are very aware of this threat out there, but the movie doesn't deliberately tell you, hey, there's going to be a werewolf out there. If you hadn't seen that werewolf is in the title of the movie, you probably wouldn't know what it is that these people are afraid of. And there's some people who want to send them out, and there's one lady in particular, the bartender, who doesn't really feel comfortable sending these guys out into the middle of the night onto the road again, because they already know what's going to happen. They know it's a full moon. They know the werewolf's going to be out there. And not too long into the movie, they do end up getting attacked by the werewolf. Our main character, David, ends up bolting happening the second that the werewolf shows up and takes out his friend Jack. And I found this to be kind of hilarious because rewatching it, I forgot how far David runs while his friend Jack is screaming for help. And then after, like, I don't know, running half a football field, he's like, oh yeah, Jack. And he runs back for Jack, but Jack's now been completely decimated. And then the werewolf ends up jumping onto David. He ends up getting bit. And I'm sure you can imagine where it goes from there. So yeah, this film for me is just an entertaining horror film. Incredibly well acted. A lot of nuance in the performance. A lot of nuance in the dialogue. But what I enjoy about the film is that it's not just a straight up horror film. It does have these comedic elements. It does have these dramatic elements. And it has a very unique story for a werewolf film. Now before I get into the rest of my thoughts on this movie, let's go ahead and hear what Blacktastic had to say about this.
Yo, what's happening? It's your boy from Blacktastic Media. And I'm teaming up with my main man, Anthony A. Perez, for another collab. An American Werewolf in London. This movie dropped in 1981, directed by John Landis. And I have to admit, I was too young to see this movie in theaters when it came out. But years later, we had a thing at our house called On TV. I was able to watch the movie years later at home, and man, scared the shit out of me. John Landis is a masterful director, and he was known for doing comedy early on in his career. Now, he wrote this script years ago, but never could get it in production. It cost too much money. And then he did National Lampoon's Animal House, the Blues Brothers. Dude started stacking some cash to the side and put together a team, and finally got a chance to make the movie he always wanted to do, An American Werewolf in London. And if you ever seen John Landis in an interview, he's a little off. He's a little tapped in the head. He likes horror, he likes comedy, he likes to tell stories, and that odd combination all meshed together made for a classic at the time. Critics were blown away, or they were scared to death, because this movie broke every rule in the way you tell a story, you know, and it was hard to categorize this movie. But in the end, this movie was scary as hell. It was gross, grotesque. It was comical. It had a love story. This movie had everything you wanted. And in the 80s, it was a time where werewolves were very, very popular. And I've seen every werewolf movie there is. Nothing compares to An American Werewolf in London. The title says it all. You got two American tourists over in London. They're, travelers. And they come to this cavern. And it's a weird place. Dealing with all these Englishmen inside the bar. And they're talking and, asking questions about that star on the wall, and they're looking at them crazy. They look at Americans crazy anyway. But they're laughing, throwing darts, and this conversation gets kind of serious. All right, you Americans, you better stay your ass on that path. And beware, there's a full moon tonight. And they thought they were trying to scare them, but they were telling the truth because they knew there was something out there that will fuck them up. They're walking outside, it starts to rain, it's dark, the clouds part, and there is a full freaking moon. They start hearing howling in the background, and what did these two white boys do? Veer off the goddamn path. These motherfuckers are walking through the brush, the trees, and I'm like, these are some stupid motherfuckers. Whatever happens to them, they deserve it. David and Jack are the two main characters in this movie. David's wearing the red jacket, Jack's wearing the green jacket, and they're walking, they're singing, laughing, trying to be jovial. At the same time, you can tell these motherfuckers are scared. They start to pick up the pace, they're getting a little, uneasy. They keep hearing these sounds, they're trying to guess, is it a dog, is it a coyote? They don't have coyotes in London, motherfucker. So they're getting really, really scared. Listen, man, let's head back to that damn cavern, because I don't know where we're going. By this time, they're lost. They're trying to walk back, and that sound is getting closer and closer. The growling, the howling, and they figure out, oh my God, that sound is right in front of us. David and his dumbass slips and fall. Jack says, oh yeah, you try to scare him, try to help his ass up. As he went to go reach for his hand to help him up, a werewolf comes out of nowhere and fucks Jack up. He goes straight for the throat, tears his throat out. This man is screaming Bloody Mary. He is getting his ass torn apart. What does David do? Get up and bust out, break out, bam, he was gone. This man is running like he's in the Olympics. Then he realized, man, that's my best friend back there getting attacked by this animal. He runs back and man, Jack is devoured. Then he gets attacked. And by the time the first bite happens and he's scratched, those people from the cabin show up with guns and stuff and start shooting that animal. And Jack's laying there, you know, dazed and confused. He leans over, look at his friend. His friend is mutilated. And he looks the other way, and there's a naked elderly man with holes in his body. Then he wakes up in the hospital. That's when you meet Nurse Alex for the first time. The doctor comes in, and they say, oh yeah, the people at the cabin told us that you got attacked by some crazy maniac. He says, no, it was some kind of animal. Now, where's my friend Jack? Is he okay? The doctor looked at him and said, sir, sad to say, your friend is dead. He goes, dead? He said, no, he's dead. He said, well, I'm telling you, there was some kind of wolf or some kind of animal attacked my friend and then attacked me. No one believes me. He said, well, you know, you'd be surprised what a man can do with his bare hands. But then Jack comes into the room mutilated. I'm like, man, what the fuck is going on? Well, he's part of the undead crew now. He's stuck in limbo. He can't quite cross over because the curse of the wolf need to be lifted in order for these people who've been attacked by a wolf to die. I'm like, man, that is a brilliant, brilliant plot point. And Jack was telling David, look, you're a werewolf, whether you want to believe it or not. In 2 days, you're going to change into a monster and you're going to kill more people. And I'm going to have more best friends that look like me. You have to die to lift the curse. Therefore, I can die and go on to the other world. Man, that's some heavy news to drop on somebody. Well, David's having all these weird nightmares, like he's chilling with his family. These monsters break in looking like Nazis and shooting up everybody, stabbing people. And this movie is a trip. It is absolutely frightening. And you don't know where the scares are going to come from. They come out of left field. So here he is with this burden of thinking that something's wrong with him. But he knows, look, I saw what I saw and I heard what I heard. Slowly but surely, him and Miss Nurse Alex are starting to hit it off. And he's still having these nightmares. He has a nightmare that the nurse get attacked by these ghouls and bust through the window and stabbing her to death. You know, something's going on in his head. He can't quite put it together. And Jack keeps showing up. And he shows up again another day, and he's starting to rot. He's like a green tone. By this time, Nurse Alex and David hit it off to the point where she goes, look, you're a handsome American man. Normally I don't do this. Come to my crib and come tap these guts. You can have them. They're all yours. And he's having nightmares more, and he's telling her everything. She's like, look, David, I know you're saying you're going to turn into a monster and you're seeing dead people walk around, but you're just so handsome and so cute. She wasn't taking him serious. And then finally, we get to the part of the movie that everybody and their mama talks about when he transforms for the first time. It is a work of art. It is horrific, absolutely horrifying to watch and to listen to. The practical effects and the sound design alone on this part won this movie an Oscar. And a year later at the Oscars, Rick Baker, who is the hair and makeup designer for this movie, won for best makeup and hair at the Academy Awards a year later. And it's for the scene right here. And throughout the movie, there's other people wearing masks and ghoulish things, people getting their throats slit. This movie is grotesque, but this is the scene that won him the award. And when Jack tells him, You're going to turn into a monster? Boy, was he right. Because David transformed into a werewolf in a way that cinema has yet to match or to be seen by anybody else. This is a work of art. And then he goes out and kills 6 people. And the nurse is like, where were you last night? You just took off. He said, well, you know, I was out. And this motherfucker woke up at a zoo, butt ass naked. Got lions and tigers looking at him, and he's in a cage where? With some wolves. They're looking at him like they was his daddy. Like, hey, buddy, how you doing? Yeah, you talk wolf talk now, don't you? Mm-hmm. You hanging with us. And he had to get up, and it's kind of funny. This is where the comedy comes in. He's running around butt naked through a park and grabs some balloons and from a little kid and runs around naked until he's able to find some female clothes to get dressed and tell this part of the story. No one believes him, but you know, the next day they're getting a taxi cab and the guy's talking about, yeah, there was a mass murderer last night. 6 people got killed and mutilated. He's like, see, it's me. David, don't go away. We try to get you some help. Stupid ass white boy jumps out the vehicle and runs. Hey, look, I'm gonna take you to the doctor to get you some help. Didn't listen. And what does he do? He sees his dead buddy Jack again hanging out in front of a movie theater, a porn movie theater. They go inside and they're watching porn, and David is listening to Jack telling him more stories. Look, these are the 6 people you killed last night. I want you to meet them. These people who are freshly bled and scratched up and mutilated are talking to him. Yeah, you killed me. Yeah, you killed me. It's horrifying to watch. But all the while in the background, you have a porno that's the backdrop of the sound. So you got people fucking. Why is he talking to these mutilated bodies? It's a weird scene, man. But John Landis has a weird personality. But as a director, this dude is brilliant. Some of my favorite Eddie Murphy movies he directed, Trading Places. He did Coming to America. So he understands black comedy. And he also did Beverly Hills Cop 3. We will never, ever bring that up again with Eddie Murphy. But Michael Jackson was such a fan of this movie, he wanted to work with John Landis. And therefore, Thriller, the video, was directed by John Landis. It was his first music video that he ever did, working with Michael Jackson. The video is a cult classic. It changed videos forever, telling short stories in a video form. And yeah, John Landis in the 80s, couldn't nobody touch him. The man was amazing. But back to the movie. And so he knows what he is now. And before he can leave the theater, he transforms again into a wolf, and he is fucking motherfuckers up. And this time you get a really good look at this wolf. This wolf is still the best werewolf I've ever seen on camera. It's buff, is walking on all 4, is snapping at people. It bites some dude's head off. It rolls across the street. He's causing traffic jams and people crashing into cars and people getting hit and thrown from their vehicles and then getting ran over by another vehicle. He is jacking people up. People are crashing through glass windows, getting cut up. This movie is a trip, and it comes out of nowhere. It's just comedy one moment, a little bit of romance, and then mutilation to the 10th power. It is a trip. Nurse Alex comes along and she goes, David, they're going to kill you, please. And the wolf looks at her and he kind of has a snarl on his face, and the snarl kind of stops. His face is starting to soften. His eyes are staring at her. You're like, oh man, she's getting to him. No, bitch, he's about to go for your neck. And as he leaps for her to kill her, pow, 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 all the cops shoot this wolf. And then at that moment, he changes back into just being David, his butt ass naked with bullet holes all in his body. And then the credits roll. It's a very abrupt ending, but if you understand John Landis, I'm not surprised. This movie is in a category of its own. It spawned all kind of other great directors to do movies like this. And wow, like Sam Raimi was a fan of this movie, became to do his type of movies. So you see what Sam Raimi got his tutelage from. This movie is a classic. It's a horror film, it's a comedy, it's a lot of things. But what it is is a fantastic movie, and I'm glad it got an Oscar for best makeup and hair because it absolutely deserved it. And haven't seen this movie in a long time. It still holds up. The story is a little quirky, like the dream sequences and stuff. That part threw me off, but it's still enjoyable to watch because it's crazy how everything transpires in this movie. But An American Werewolf in London, have you seen it? If not, you need to give this a watch. This movie is incredible. My man, Mr. Perez, won't you go ahead and take over and drop some science on these folks about An American Werewolf in London?
As usual, a big thanks to Blacktastic for being in yet another video. Love having you in my collabs as usual. And for you guys who have not checked out Blacktastic already, the link is down below in the description box. Go give him some love. He's got tons of great content. He's working on his latest short film coming up very soon. So I'm very excited to see what he's got coming out very soon. So definitely go and check out his link down below in the description box. And yeah, let's get into the rest of my thoughts on this movie. I think the one part of this movie that doesn't work for me 100% is the romantic element of this film. I found that the romantic element felt a little bit forced. Now, as the movie progresses and you spend a little more time in this romance, you know, you have to buy into it or you're just not going to enjoy the last half of the film. And I do buy into it after a while. You just kind of go with the flow and you enjoy the main character of David because that relationship and his kind of smoothness with the nurse that he ends up having this love interest with, that he's all really good at that. So that part is really enjoyable, right? But what I kind of find a little bit funny and a little bit cheesy and something that just kind of ruins the film a little bit for me, not until like where the film is ruined, but just something that takes me out of it just a little bit, is the romance and how it begins. For this nurse character who's looking over David ends up getting into the hospital after his friend has been killed by this beast, and of course they end up killing the werewolf that ended up attacking David and Jack, and this werewolf turns back into a man. So the story that these town folk that find them end up telling the officers and telling the doctors is that they were attacked by a deranged man, and that's how Jack was killed, and that's how David was attacked. But David remembers being attacked by some sort of wolf, some sort of beast, you know, and so now he's trying to tell people that he was attacked by some sort of beast or some sort of wolf, and they're saying, no, you were attacked by a man. Like, there's, you know, that's what the police said, that's what the reports say, that's what happened. And he's like, no, that's not the case. Like, we were attacked by this monster. And so over the course of time, as he's slowly kind of getting closer to becoming a werewolf, he ends up kind of having these crazy visions, and it's something that for him is kind of driving him a little crazy, and this nurse is watching this all happen. But it's not too long into this that she's just kind of like super into him. She's super attracted to him, and though she in her mindset kind of looks at it like, oh yeah, he's going through trauma, he's just went through this incredibly traumatic experience, as soon as he's gonna get released from the hospital, she's just so open to just having him come and stay at her place. And at some point, this is paraphrasing because I don't remember exactly how it was said, but at some point in the movie, she just pretty much just says to him that she recognizes how crazy all of this is, but that she's just so wildly attracted to him. And that's paraphrasing, but just the idea of this nurse seeing this guy who went through this incredibly traumatic experience where his friend died, and she knows one part of the story, you know, she knows it a different way, and he's telling her that he's a werewolf and he's being visited by his friends, and just to kind of see it from her perspective, it's just like, why would she ever be like, yeah, just come stay with me in my house and let's sleep together? Just a very strange, bizarre way to kind of get the romance element of the film started. So that just, rewatching it just seemed a little strange to me, revisiting it. But outside of that, this film is just a really great time. And the main thing I really got to praise about this film, the main thing anybody really praises about this film, beyond the performance, beyond the story and the drama and all of that great stuff about the movie, are the special effects, specifically the practical effects. I mean, Rick Baker, the guy who did the effects in this film, top-notch work. The iconic moment where he becomes a werewolf in this movie is top-notch, and it still looks incredibly realistic. Every single moment, every single part of him becoming a werewolf looks incredibly realistic. It still holds up. There is that element of that 80s horror cheese, but I love that. This movie just has some really beautiful practical effects that really are believable. They still hold up 100%, and it's better than a lot of the practical effects or effects that you see in horror films today. So without a doubt, one of the biggest praises to give this movie that anybody usually has is to Rick Baker and the special effects that were done in this film. Just top-notch work, and the scene where he turns into a werewolf still is top-notch. It looks amazing, it plays out amazingly, and you just are thoroughly engaged in every single moment. And those effects are definitely the reason for that, and it's something that you need to praise when you talk about this movie. Something else that I do want to mention really quickly is the ending of this film. It ends incredibly abrupt, and this film just comes from a different era where it was like, here's the end of the story, it's over, right? And almost a part of me as a modern day viewer, I wanted to see more of the story. But yeah, the movie ends up ending with David, the werewolf, ending up being killed after he goes on a little bit of a rampage through the city. As soon as we see his dead body there at the very end, it just ends. It just goes straight to the credits. And so this movie is not conventional in a lot of ways, but it is just incredibly entertaining. It's well acted. It's got incredible special effects, and I couldn't recommend it more. So yeah, guys, that's going to be my thoughts on this movie. Hit that like button down below if you guys enjoyed this review. Go and check out Blacktastic. Go give him some love. If you guys enjoyed this movie, definitely tell me your thoughts about the movie down below. And if you've never seen it, I do highly recommend it. I know we just spoiled a lot of the film for you right here, pretty much all of it, but I think there's a lot about this movie that you just have to experience, even if you know the events, because you just won't really be able to talk about it the exact same way unless you've seen it. So I highly recommend it, American Werewolf in London. Comment your thoughts down below, hit that like button, subscribe if you guys have not already done so, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.